few weeks ago, I was giving a retreat on Matthew's Gospel as a gospel for people in transition, because it comes out of that framework or that context. And during it, I spoke on the wilderness of the time and how it speaks to the wilderness of our time. But little did I anticipate what would happen in succeeding weeks. We're now in a wilderness of a different kind with the coronavirus, which enables us all to question, to step back, to be surprised, to be astonished, and to wonder where it's all going. But the wilderness is always a place of testing. It has been in biblical times a place of testing and a place to find God. And the challenge is always to find where God is in that. And the same question goes on for people now. Because people will ask me that question, where is God in this? But they're speaking very much of how do we get back to where we were? When will normality return? And when I reflect on that, I say, it won't return. This is an invitation that will bring us forward, not backward. The temptation of the chosen people in the wilderness was, let's go back to Egypt. But that was never the Lord's response to them. They were to journey onward, to let go of control, to trust God, to come to some level of dependence on God. They murmured, they complained, they weren't happy with the leadership. But in effect, they had to come to accept God's way. And we're in the same dilemma in our time because we find we're not in control. We had plans, we had things would go in a particular way. Suddenly everything is turned upside down. Massive changes are made in the economy, in society, in the ability to travel, to shop. And it affects relationships at all levels. But this is a time then that invites us to look. Because in a strange way, the wilderness was always a place of something new emerging. John the Baptist began in the wilderness. He didn't begin in the temple or in Jerusalem. He began in the wilderness. His manner and style of life reflected that in how he dressed and the quality of the food he had. He ate what the desert produced, locusts and wild honey. So there's a profound lesson for us in that something new can emerge from the wilderness. Something totally unexpected can happen. We're not going back to where we were. This is going to change radically ways of work, travel, environment. It brings up new questions and new opportunities. And the invitation for us is to look on that way, to accept the current reality, to journey with it, but to take time to reflect and see where it's leading us. Because there's something there to invite us, what matters, who matters. In a strange way, a crisis brings out what's best in people. And we find that going on around us. People are responding to the needs of others, they're looking out for others, they're shopping for them, they're going to get medicines for them. Even a suggestion about making contact, phoning, keeping regular contact with people who are isolated. So this is a whole new dimension for us to enter into this experience, to grow through it rather than to hasten the end of it. Because we have a lot to learn from what went on before. I said the chosen people went through the wilderness to a new land. The chosen people came back through the wilderness on their return from exile. But in all those cases, there was a form of slavery, external and internal. The same goes on for us. There are things out there that confine us, but there are things within us that enslave us, things that hold us bound. So I'd like to avail of this time for myself as a time to reflect on what matters and who matters. The mission is to walk with what is happening, to learn about ourselves and how we would be good neighbours to each other through it. But look to God to give us the ultimate meaning that brings us to the deeper questions and will resolve what is most significant and more important for us in the long run. Some text that you might reflect on these days or that you might find helpful. Hosea chapter 2 verse 14 speaks of God saying, I will lure her into the wilderness and speak to her heart. Matthew chapter 3 has John the Baptist in the wilderness with his proclamation and his baptisms. Chapter 4 of Matthew, the temptations in the wilderness. And those are the temptations now. Because we too would look for the easy solution. We look for something that was of our own making. But the invitation there is to turn to God to provide what we want. They might be texts that you might reflect on and might find helpful to speak to the current reality and to find some strength in it from what the Lord offers to us.